Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Foreman, and this is the new rusty Heckler. The Heckler, it has a Venturi bottom, similar to what they're putting in the Hustler and then also the Rooster. And this board has a fishier shape than those boards. It's got a wider nose outline, even has like a little bit of a subtle beak in the nose, flatter nose entry, and you can see wider nose and wider throughout to a single wing swallowtail. So you got your wings right here, and then it goes into a swallowtail, or what Rusty calls a dovetail, which is just a real small cutout right here, and the point's pretty far out, the nice big tail block for pushing on. This board, super nice. We've had a good run of surf, and have been able to surf this board at the peak of swells, and then also as the swells are tapering off, and a great all-around board. Especially we get a ton of people coming into the shop saying, I need a fish, I need a fish, I need a fish. And for a lot of those people, they actually don't need a fish, because a lot of people that are looking for that fish end up on a retro fish, which ends up being like a wide, flat, no rocker, thick railed, clunky, like twin fin style board. And those boards, although they've got great glide and you can wiggle them and kind of go real fast down the line, they're actually pretty technical to surf in demanding conditions. And being as flat as they are, they really don't fit into the wave all that well. In the Rusty write-up on this board, they say, it's something fishy, it's something fishy. And I think what they're talking about there is, having this wider outline and wider nose and flatter nose and a little bit of beak. But really, beyond that, it's got a lot of performance built into the shape. What you notice when you surf this board, it paddles really well, having that width and flatness and beak up front, because it just has a lot of volume in this area right here to float your chest. Gets into waves really easy. The next thing you're going to notice is that this board is for as wide as it is and relatively flat as it is, it's really thin comparatively to the rest of the dimensions. And so what that does is a lot of boards that are wide and flat, they'll also be thick. And then so you get the board going super, super fast, but then you can't turn it because you can't depress that water, you can't knife that edge into the water in the turn, so you end up like bouncing and bobbling and jumping all over the wave. This board is thin throughout, and then has a flat deck, so it carries that smaller number all the way, that thickness number all the way across the entire deck, and then it tapers down. And so what that does is it gives you the wider width for paddling, for stability, for planing across, for gliding across flat sections. But when you get going super fast, which this board can get going incredibly fast, you still have a thin rail to be able to put into the water and really drive those turns super hard and create speed. Because a wide board's great, but if you can't get the rail into the water, then you don't have the ability to generate that extra speed. And this board could generate a ton of speed. So having those thinner rails is really nice. Next thing I want to talk about is the tail on this board, and we always talk about tail blocks being the gas pedal for creating speed, extra speed that the waves don't have. So this board, you can tell right here, especially forward of the wings, like in this section right here, this board has a lot of width, and so that width is going to give you the ability to push on the board really hard in the turns and have it push back up on you and generate that speed. It steps down right here into a reduced area dovetail. Again, still right here, you're still looking at a pretty big tail block across here, and then just a little bit of a notch out right here. So what this does here is two things. One, if you ran this all the way to the back of the board, your tail block would be gigantic, and it would only be for the smallest to surf. So by dropping that down, it brings it more into a moderate plus range for the width of the tail block, but it also gives you a release point here and a little bit of an elbow to bend off of in the turns, like a pivotal point in the turns. The other thing that this wing does is when you're looking at the channel bottom, which starts up here in the board right here, and then goes out through the board, the two channels right here of the Venturi channel bottom, they exit right off of this wing, right out of this wing right here. So they're exiting right here and right here. And the rocker line at there also then bends the tail to give you a little bit of additional rocker line. See if we could fit this in here so you can see this behind that wing. So the wing is right here where my finger is, where my index finger is, and you can see that that rocker really drops a little bit extra right past that wing. And what that allows you to do is if you lean forward and you're driving, like it gives you a flatter rocker line, a more driving rocker line, and a more glide capable rocker line. But then when you really want to lay into a hard turn and really get the board to go vertical or snap really hard off the top, when you get way back on the tail pad, that additional rocker from here, from where that wing is back, the additional rocker right in this area right here allows you to crank those turns harder when you want to. But when you don't want that extra rocker, you can just get forward off of it. Talking about the tail area on this board, we've talked a lot about the tail block and the back here, and then also how wide the tail is here. It's important when you're looking at a board like this that has, whether it's this board or any other board that has this much tail area, that you pick the right tail pad for it. You want to have something that you can open up like this. This is a Blackline 5-piece pad, and you're able to open the pad up to cover the area of the tail. So if you take some tiny little tail blocked short pad that was meant for a like a 5/8 thruster, it's going to look, it's going to look ridiculous on the board, but functionally it's not going to cover enough of the area of the tail of where you're going to be on the board. So having a pad that not only goes wide enough, but also goes a little bit forward too, to use this area right here on the board, I think definitely helps the overall performance of the board. We rode this board with a bunch of different fin setups. We rode it classic thruster, we rode it quad fin, and then we also rode it 2+1, because if you look at like that kind of fishy outline of the board, it kind of screams 2+1 and actually works really well 2+1. The quad, I would say, is probably the best setup for this board, for what most people are used to for this style of board. Thruster also works. What we did notice playing around with fins is it did like a little bit larger of a fin, just based on how wide the tail is. So if you have a really narrow tail, you could typically run your fins a little bit smaller. You're not jumping like a whole size, but you want to run it, you know, if you're kind of like, if you have two fins and one fin's a little bit smaller, you'll like it better on a smaller tailed board. On a bigger tailed board like this, you want to offset that area with a little bit bigger fin. So these are FCS2 performers, and since I'm 200 plus pounds, I'm like 215 pounds, these are extra large fronts and then medium trailers for a good release in the turn. And that worked really well on this board. Like I said, that MR twin with the little finger trailer worked incredibly well on this board, and then also the extra large thrusters for this size. This is a 6'4" in this board. I rode the 6'2" and the 6'4", but for me, I like the extra larges in this board. Just a little bit more fin area. I can't say enough good things about this board. This is, for the range of surf that it covers, this was, you know, one of the best boards I've surfed this year, if not the best board on some of the days. A lot of it was the day, just because we had some really good days, but really can't say enough good things about it, with the design of the board, you know, the width of the board, but having the combination of that thin rail and then that flat deck just makes it a really drivey board down the line, and the ability to generate a lot of top end speed. The channel bottom, you know, some people say, yeah, it looks cool. Some people say it works. I know that on this board, the whole combination of the channel bottom and the width and the thickness and the outline, I mean, everything works together really, really well. And the majority of the days that we got to surf this board, I would say it was about waist to head high, and anything from mushy to barreling. And this board always felt really, really good, and just really drivey, really good top end speed. The ability to make sections that you can't make on like on a standard board, just because of this tail and the ability to drive off the tail, and then also with the extra speed that you get out of the channel bottom. But just a really good board. That also, like late drops, it was very forgiving, and the ability to get in the wave early and then have this rail engage in the wall of the wave. Not like a lot of times if you have a flat, wide, thick board, the board won't turn and connect high on the wave. So you end up on late drops just going straight down the wave, bottom turning into flats, and then taking the lip to the head. This board, you can get into the wave early and engage that rail and start turning way higher on the wave with this thinner rail and get all of that speed from being higher up on the wave. So even though it's wide, it's not thick and chunky like right on the rail. So that was definitely noticeable. The little beak is cool because it keeps additional volume in this whole area without making it enormously thick or enormously bulky on the rail as well. So there's a lot of good things to say about it. Great board, really good mid-range board for a lot of people. You could ride this all the way down to absolute ankle high. You know, something like Rusty's Muffin Top is going to be better if you're trying to fully dominate that range and you want to have more of a static surfing style. If you're actively generating a lot of speed, you can easily ride this down to the smallest day and still have it hold in good surf because of the profile of the rail and just the overall design of the board. So great board. It's called the Rusty Heckler with the Venturi bottom, similar to what they're putting in the Rooster and the Hustler. And can't say enough good things about it. Awesome board. Was really, really impressed with it. A lot of people that rode it here at the shop, they're saying it's one of the best boards they've ridden this year. So you should definitely check it out. If you have any more questions about the Heckler or any of the other Rusty boards, you can check out our website, realwatersports.com/surfing, or you can give us a call at the shop, 252-987-6000. Thanks for tuning in.